The new Harvard boss stood at the head of the meeting room, waving my report in the air with a red circle around one typo. Her voice cut through the silence like broken glass. "This is sloppy," she announced, her eyes scanning each face before landing on mine. "This kind of work is unacceptable here." Then she turned to my manager, her expression cold and calculating. "People like this drag down standards. Remove her, today." The words hit me like a physical blow. My stomach dropped to the floor. She wasn't asking for a correction or suggesting improvement. She was ordering my execution. I sat frozen in my chair, watching her perfect smile spread across her face. This wasn't about the typo. This wasn't about my work quality. This was about power. She had decided I was a threat, and now she was making her move in front of everyone. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the edge of the table. 6 years of building relationships, creating successful campaigns, and earning respect. All of it dismissed with a single red circle and a Harvard degree. The room went completely still. You could hear the air conditioning humming overhead and someone's coffee cup settling on the wooden table. My manager hesitated, his pen frozen mid-note, his face pale. He glanced at me, then back at her, before nodding with a tight jaw. My coworkers stared hard at their laptops, refusing to make eye contact. Tom from accounting suddenly found his keyboard fascinating. Jessica from design studied her notebook like it contained state secrets. Nobody wanted to be the next target. The humiliation burned hotter than fire, spreading through my chest. I wasn't just being criticized for poor performance. I was being publicly destroyed, my reputation shredded in front of people I'd worked alongside for years. People who knew better. She stood there, arms crossed, waiting for my manager to confirm her order. The silence stretched on like torture. I could feel my face turning red, but I kept my expression neutral. Inside, though, rage was building like a storm. This wasn't professional feedback. This was character assassination, and everyone in that room knew it. And that's how I learned the truth about my new boss. She wasn't here to build a successful team or grow the company. She was here to feed her ego and prove she was smarter than everyone else, especially people like me. Fresh out of Harvard with her MBA still smelling like printer ink, she'd walked into our company like she owned the place. Her first week, she'd made it clear that she thought we were all beneath her standards. Local talent, she'd called us in that condescending tone. But I was her biggest threat. Not because I was incompetent. Exactly the opposite. I was the person everyone came to when things needed fixing. I had the relationships, the knowledge, and the respect she wanted for herself. So she decided I had to go. Not through performance reviews or honest feedback. Through public humiliation and carefully planted doubts about my abilities. What she didn't know was that I'd been watching her too. I'd seen how she operated, how she manipulated situations to make herself look good. She thought she was playing chess while we were playing checkers. She was about to learn how wrong she was. My name is Jolie, and I'm 32 years old. For 6 years, I've been the senior marketing strategist at Moxie & Associates, a mid-sized consulting firm downtown. I've built some of this company's most successful campaigns and maintained relationships with our biggest clients. Before she arrived, I'd never once been called sloppy. My work was thorough, creative, and effective. Clients specifically requested me for their projects. New employees were assigned to shadow me during their first month. I was the person management turned to when they needed something done right. I didn't have an MBA from Harvard. I had something better, real experience and proven results. I'd started as an intern straight out of college and worked my way up through every department. I knew this company inside and out. My office walls were covered with thank you letters from satisfied clients and awards from successful campaigns. My desk drawers held business cards from industry contacts I'd cultivated over years of networking and relationship building. I lived in a small apartment downtown, drove a reliable used car, and spent my weekends hiking or reading marketing books. I wasn't flashy, but I was effective. Until she decided that effectiveness wasn't enough. 2 weeks earlier, she'd walked into our office like she was gracing us with her presence. Her suit was perfectly pressed, her hair styled in that expensive way that screamed professional success. Within an hour of arriving, her Harvard diploma was framed and hung prominently on her office wall. I'm here to raise standards, she'd announced to the gathered staff, her eyes scanning each of us like we were students who'd disappointed her. Things are going to change around here. She spoke about efficiency and innovation, using buzzwords she'd probably learned in business school, but there was something cold in her tone. Something that made me uncomfortable. She wasn't talking about collaboration or team building. She was talking about dominance. During the introduction meeting, she'd asked each of us to present our current projects. When my turn came, I'd outlined the campaign I was developing for our largest client, a project worth over $2 million to the company. She'd listened with that practiced smile, nodding at appropriate moments, but her eyes told a different story. They were calculating, evaluating, already planning how to take credit for my work. I should have seen the warning signs then. In her first team meeting, she dismissed one of my proposals as outdated thinking, before I'd even finished explaining it. She didn't ask questions about the strategy or request clarification on the research. She simply waved her hand dismissively and moved on to the next agenda item. The proposal was for a digital marketing campaign that had taken me 3 weeks to research and develop. It was based on current market trends and client feedback. But she decided it was worthless without even reading past the headline. My coworkers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They knew my work, and they knew this dismissal was unfair. But nobody spoke up. She was the new boss, fresh from Harvard, and challenging her seemed risky. I kept my smile fixed in place, even though my fists were clenched under the table. I nodded politely and made notes in my planner, like her feedback was valuable. But inside, I was burning with frustration. After the meeting, Tom approached me quietly. "That was harsh," he whispered. "Your ideas are always solid." But he said it in a way that made clear he wouldn't be defending me publicly. That's when I realized I was on my own. She started excluding me from key email chains, conversations about projects I'd been managing for months. Suddenly, I'd arrive at work to find decisions had been made without my input. Clients I'd managed for years were suddenly bypassing me and going directly to her office. When I asked my manager about the changes, he looked uncomfortable. "We're restructuring some responsibilities," he explained, not meeting my eyes. "Nothing personal." But it felt very personal. I watched from my office as she met with my biggest client, the one I'd been nurturing for 3 years. She didn't invite me to the meeting or ask for background information. She just took over like I'd never existed. The client sent me a confused email afterward. Who was that woman? She seemed to think she was in charge of our account. I had to diplomatically explain the new chain of command while trying not to sound bitter. Within a week, 3 of my ongoing projects had been reassigned. The official reason was workload balancing. But everyone knew what was really happening. She was systematically removing me from anything important. My days became filled with busy work, updating spreadsheets and organizing files, tasks that could have been done by an intern. I was walking past the break room when I heard her voice through the partially open door. She was talking to someone from HR, and my name caught my attention. I stopped, pretending to check my phone while I listened. "She's competent enough," she was saying, "but she's unpolished, not leadership material. I'm concerned about how she represents the company to our more sophisticated clients." My stomach dropped. She wasn't just undermining my current work, she was poisoning my future at the company. She was planting seeds of doubt about my abilities and my potential. "I see," the HR representative replied. "Have there been specific incidents?" "Nothing dramatic," she continued smoothly. "Just a general lack of refinement. You understand. Our clients expect a certain level of professionalism." I wanted to burst through that door and defend myself. I wanted to list every successful project, every satisfied client, every positive review I'd received. But I forced myself to walk away instead. She was building a case against me, using vague accusations that would be impossible to disprove. How do you defend against being called unpolished? How do you prove you have refinement? I realized this was bigger than workplace politics. This was war. The breaking point came during our monthly client presentation. I was midway through explaining our quarterly results when she interrupted me. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting across mine. "This is exactly why I say we need higher standards." Every head in the room turned toward her. Our clients looked confused. My colleagues looked mortified. I stood there, frozen, my presentation remote still in my hand. She turned to the group with that practiced smile. Would anyone like to explain why we still tolerate mediocrity in our presentations? The question hung in the air like poison gas. My voice died in my throat. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't process what was happening. She'd just called me mediocre in front of our most important clients. She'd humiliated me publicly and professionally. One of the clients, Mrs. Onyx, looked uncomfortable. Actually, we've always been very satisfied with Jolie's work, she said quietly. But the damage was done. I somehow finished the presentation, my hands shaking and my voice barely steady. But I knew everyone in that room would remember this moment. They'd remember her calling my work mediocre. After the clients left, nobody made eye contact with me. The humiliation was complete. That afternoon, my manager called me into his office. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged 10 years in the past 2 weeks. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usually neat desk was cluttered with papers. "She wants you out," he said quietly, not looking up from his hands. "She doesn't think you fit her vision for the department." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I'd expected this conversation, but hearing it made it real. My hands went cold, and I felt dizzy. "Based on what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "My performance reviews have always been excellent. My clients are satisfied. My projects are successful." He sighed deeply. "I know. That's what makes this so difficult." He finally looked up at me, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. "She's convinced upper management that changes need to be made. She has their ear." "So what happens now?" "I'm supposed to start documenting performance issues," he admitted, building a case for termination. The betrayal stung worse than her direct attacks. My own manager, someone I'd worked with for 4 years, was being forced to fabricate reasons to fire me. I nodded calmly and walked out of his office. But inside, I was already planning my counterattack. I could have screamed. I could have stormed into her office and demanded explanations. I could have marched up to the executive floor and defended myself to upper management. Every instinct told me to fight back immediately and loudly. Instead, I nodded politely, walked back to my office, and quietly closed the door. I sat at my desk for a full minute, breathing deeply and letting the rage settle into something more useful. Determination. If she wanted a war, she would get one. But it would be fought on my terms, with my weapons, using my knowledge of this company and these people. She might have a Harvard MBA, but I had something more valuable: time and experience. I opened my laptop and created a new folder labeled Documentation. If she was going to build a case against me, I was going to build a better case against her. Every email, every meeting, every decision would be recorded and analyzed. She thought she was playing chess while we were playing checkers. But she'd underestimated her opponent. I'd been playing chess since before she knew this company existed. The game was officially on, and I intended to win. I began documenting everything with the precision of a detective building a case. Every email she sent, every project decision she made, every meeting she held, all of it went into my private files. I created detailed timelines and cross-reference conversations. When she contradicted herself between meetings, I noted it. When she took credit for ideas that weren't hers, I recorded it. When she made promises she couldn't keep, I tracked them. My laptop became a fortress of evidence. I started recording phone conversations where legally possible and saving screenshots of every digital interaction. I backed up everything to my personal cloud storage and printed hard copies of the most important documents. The folder grew thicker every day. Email chains showing how she'd excluded me from decisions. Meeting notes proving she'd dismissed successful strategies without justification. Client feedback that contradicted her narrative about my performance. I was building an unbreakable defense, but more than that, I was gathering ammunition. Every lie she told, every manipulation she attempted, every unfair decision she made was carefully cataloged and preserved. She thought my silence meant I was defeated. She had no idea I was preparing for battle. I started spending more time with the people she ignored, the administrative assistants, the junior staff, the longtime employees she considered beneath her notice. These conversations happened naturally, during coffee breaks and lunch hours. "She's impossible," whispered Janet, the receptionist who'd been with the company for 15 years. "Yesterday she snapped at me for transferring a call to the wrong extension. It was an honest mistake." The facilities manager, Carlos, had his own story. "She demanded I rearrange her entire office layout 3 times in 1 week. Then she complained that we were being inefficient. Even the interns were feeling her wrath. She made me redo a simple filing task 4 times, one of them confided. Each time she changed what she wanted, but acted like I was too stupid to understand her original instructions." I listened carefully, offering sympathy and support. But I was also building a network of witnesses, people who could testify to her unreasonable behavior and impossible standards, people who had seen her true character. They trusted me because I'd always treated them with respect. Now that trust was becoming my secret weapon. Outwardly, I began playing the perfect employee. I smiled brightly at her criticism and thanked her for her feedback. When she gave me impossible deadlines, I said, "Of course," with enthusiasm. When she contradicted herself, I nodded and took careful notes. "You're being so positive lately," she commented one day, looking slightly suspicious. "I'm glad to see you're adapting to our new standards." "I really appreciate your guidance," I replied sweetly. "It's helping me grow professionally." She smiled, satisfied that she'd broken my spirit. She thought my compliance meant victory, but I was actually setting a trap. Every interaction was being carefully managed to highlight her unreasonable behavior. I started responding to her emails with overly polite language, making her criticism look harsh by comparison. I thanked her publicly for feedback that everyone knew was unfair. I made her the clear aggressor in every interaction. My colleagues began to notice the contrast. She was becoming increasingly frustrated with my pleasantness, while I appeared to be the model of professional grace under pressure. She was digging her own grave, and I was handing her the shovel with a smile. She began making increasingly bold promises to upper management, desperate to prove her worth and justify the chaos she'd created. In board meetings, she claimed she could streamline operations by 30% within 2 months. "I'll eliminate inefficiencies that have been holding this company back for years," she announced confidently. "We'll see dramatic improvements in productivity and client satisfaction." The promises were impossible, and I knew it. You can't restructure a successful department overnight without destroying what makes it work. But she was drunk on her own authority and convinced of her superiority. I watched from the sidelines as she committed the company to deadlines that couldn't be met and results that couldn't be achieved. She was writing checks her skills couldn't cash, and eventually someone would demand payment. Meanwhile, the actual work of serving clients and managing projects was falling apart. Her focus on image over substance was creating real problems that couldn't be hidden behind PowerPoint presentations. I documented every unrealistic promise and every missed deadline. The evidence was piling up like storm clouds on the horizon. The cracks started showing when our biggest client, Onyx Industries, sent a furious email about a project that had gone completely off track. "Mrs. Onyx didn't mince words. This is not what we discussed. Your team seems to have ignored every piece of feedback we provided." Instead of acknowledging the mistake or working to fix it, she doubled down. She called Mrs. Onyx directly and actually said, "We don't bend to amateur feedback. Trust the process." I nearly choked on my coffee when I heard about that conversation. Mrs. Onyx had been a marketing executive for 20 years before starting her own company. Calling her an amateur was professional suicide. That same afternoon, Mrs. Onyx forwarded the entire email chain to me with a simple message. "What happened here? This isn't the service we've come to expect." I had to carefully explain the new management structure while trying not to sound unprofessional or disloyal. But the damage was clear. Our most important client was questioning whether to continue the relationship. 2 days later, another client called to complain about similar issues. The pattern was becoming obvious to everyone except her. My evidence wasn't just complaints and notes anymore. It was airtight, time-stamped proof of systematic sabotage and professional misconduct. I had email chains showing how she'd excluded me from decisions, then blamed me when projects failed. I had recordings of her making contradictory statements about company policy. I had client feedback that directly contradicted her claims about my performance. Most importantly, I had witnesses willing to go on record about her behavior. The folder on my computer had grown into multiple folders, organized by date, topic, and severity. Everything was cross-referenced and backed up in multiple locations. If she tried to delete files or claim conversations never happened, I had proof. But I also had something else, a clear timeline showing how company performance had declined since her arrival. Client satisfaction was down, employee morale was terrible, and project completion rates had dropped significantly. The evidence painted a picture of someone who was systematically destroying a successful department to feed her own ego. And I was the only person with the complete story. I just needed the right moment to reveal it. When she scheduled a progress review with the board to showcase her improvements, I knew my moment had arrived. She'd been bragging about this presentation for weeks, calling it proof of her successful leadership. The night before her presentation, I quietly uploaded my organized files to the company's shared drive. Not in an obvious location, but somewhere they would appear if anyone searched for specific keywords or timeline information. I also sent anonymous tips to the board members' assistants, suggesting they might want to review historical performance data before the meeting. Nothing dramatic or accusatory, just professional due diligence. Then I sat back and waited. She'd built her entire presentation around taking credit for successes that preceded her arrival and blaming problems on previous management, meaning me. But now there was a paper trail showing exactly who had done what and when. Every claim she made could be fact-checked in real time. Every lie could be exposed with a simple search. She was about to walk into a room full of people armed with the truth, and she had no idea what was coming. The boardroom buzzed with quiet conversation as executives filed in for her big presentation. She stood at the front, clicking through slides with obvious pride. Her charts showed improved efficiency and streamlined operations, but I knew the real numbers. As you can see, she said confidently, the changes I've implemented have resulted in significant improvements across all metrics. But when the questions started, things began to unravel. Who originally developed the Onyx Industries campaign? Asked one director. The one you're claiming as a success? She hesitated for just a moment. That was a team effort under my guidance. But according to these files, the director continued, pulling up documents on his tablet, Jolie developed that campaign 6 months before you arrived. The room fell silent. She looked around nervously, her perfect composure starting to crack. I've been refining and improving existing work, she said, but her voice wavered. More questions followed, each one more pointed than the last. The board had done their homework, and her presentation was falling apart in real time. One director pulled up the shared folder I'd carefully prepared. Jolie's name is on every original file for these successful projects, she said matter-of-factly. Your name only appears after these clients started expressing dissatisfaction. Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket. She stood frozen at the front, her rehearsed smile stiffening into something that looked more like a grimace. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for allies who weren't there. I was brought in to optimize existing processes, she stammered, but everyone could hear the uncertainty in her voice. By excluding the person who created them? Another board member asked. Because these emails show you systematically removed Jolie from her own projects. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Every document was time-stamped, every email was traceable, every claim could be verified or debunked within minutes. For the first time since she'd arrived, her perfect mask was cracking. Everyone in that room could see the insecurity and desperation beneath the Harvard polish. The board's questions grew sharper and more focused. Why are client satisfaction scores down 15% since your arrival? Can you explain these complaints about communication breakdowns? What's your plan for addressing the staff turnover in your department? Her voice wavered with each answer. She tried to deflect blame and make excuses, but the evidence contradicted every claim. The confidence that had carried her through 2 months of destruction was finally abandoning her. Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately, suggested the CEO, his tone making it clear this wasn't really a suggestion. She nodded quickly, gathering her materials with shaking hands. As she walked toward the door, she caught my eye through the glass conference room wall. For the first time, I saw fear in her expression. The Harvard degree and designer clothes couldn't protect her anymore. The truth was more powerful than her credentials, and everyone in that room knew it. Her reign of terror was over. The following week, 3 of my longtime clients made surprising announcements. Onyx Industries, Quasar Corp., and Raptor Consulting all terminated their contracts with Moxie and Associates. But they didn't leave us hanging. They signed directly with the consulting firm that had just hired me. Word spread quickly through the industry. These weren't just random departures. They were clients following me because they trusted my work and my integrity. They'd seen what happened at my previous company, and they chose to invest in proven results over fancy degrees. My new firm welcomed the additional business with open arms. Suddenly, I wasn't just a senior strategist anymore. I was a director with my own team and a portfolio of loyal clients. The clients made it clear in their farewell emails why they'd made the switch. "We work with people, not companies," Mrs. Onyx wrote, "and we prefer to work with people who value our partnership." Moxie and Associates lost over 40% of their revenue in a single week. The board couldn't ignore the message the market was sending about their leadership decisions. HR launched a formal investigation into the complaints that had been piling up in her absence. Once one person spoke up, others found the courage to share their experiences. Reports poured in from every level of the organization. Administrative staff described unreasonable demands and verbal abuse. Junior employees talked about impossible deadlines and contradictory instructions. Even my manager finally admitted how she'd pressured him to fabricate performance issues. The investigation revealed a pattern of bullying, incompetence, and systematic destruction of a previously successful department. Everything I documented privately was being corroborated by multiple witnesses. Her Harvard credentials couldn't protect her from the weight of evidence and testimony. The board had no choice but to act decisively to protect the company's reputation and remaining client relationships. Within 2 weeks, she was gone. No farewell party, no transition period, no golden parachute. Just a brief announcement about pursuing other opportunities and an empty office that nobody missed. The company immediately began damage control, trying to rebuild relationships and restore confidence in their operations. I walked into my new office with a director title and a salary that had doubled overnight. More importantly, I walked in with the respect I'd fought for and the professional reputation I'd defended. My new team consisted of talented people who joined specifically to work with me. They'd heard about what happened at Moxie and Associates, and they wanted to be part of something better. We had state-of-the-art equipment, generous budgets, and most importantly, management that valued results over politics. No one cared where I went to school or whether I had the right kind of MBA. The clients I'd brought with me were thriving under the new arrangement. Without bureaucratic interference and ego-driven decisions, we were able to deliver the innovative, effective campaigns they deserved. 6 months later, our department had the highest client satisfaction scores in the company's history. We were profitable, productive, and most importantly, professional. I'd learned that sometimes you have to fight for your worth, but when you do it right, the victory is complete. Looking back now, I can honestly say I'm grateful for everything that happened. She taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself and knowing my worth. She showed me the difference between real leadership and borrowed authority. Prestige can buy you a title, I told my new team during our first meeting, but it can't buy respect. That has to be earned through your actions, your integrity, and your results. The Harvard boss thought her degree made her superior to everyone else. She believed that credentials were more important than competence, and that intimidation was more effective than inspiration. She was wrong on every count. Real success comes from treating people with respect, delivering consistent results, and building genuine relationships based on trust and mutual benefit. Today, I lead a team that shares those values. We work hard, support each other, and celebrate everyone's contributions. No one feels the need to tear others down to build themselves up. The last I heard, she was still looking for a position that matched her self-perceived importance. I hope she eventually learns what I learned. True authority comes from serving others, not dominating them. But that's her journey to make. Mine led me exactly where I belong.